Have you ever wondered what kind of person you would become if one day you were given absolute power, unchecked, unpunished, and free from consequences? Deep within every human being lies a part of light and a part of darkness. We grow up believing in the inherent goodness of people, trusting that good will always triumph over evil. But history and everyday life has repeatedly shown us otherwise. Good people can do terrible things. Not because they were born evil, but because they were placed in positions of power and consumed by the very role they were given. Have you ever wondered what kind of person you would become if one day you were given absolute power, unchecked, unpunished, and free from consequences? Deep within every human being lies a part of light and a part of darkness. We grow up believing in the inherent goodness of people, trusting that good will always triumph over evil. But history and everyday life has repeatedly shown us otherwise. Good people can do terrible things. Not because they were born evil, but because they were placed in positions of power and consumed by the very role they were given. That story, though symbolic, keeps repeating itself in the modern world. And the most terrifying truth is this: Lucifer doesn't come from the outside. He lives within us. We often feel confident in our own morality, believing only bad people do bad things. But that belief holds true only until we are placed in the right situation. A new role, a higher status, a little more power in our hands, and our sense of self begins to shift, slowly, quietly. And if we are not fully aware, we might not even realize who we've become. Not all of us possess power, but once we do, very few can resist its seductive pull. Power is like an invisible cloak. It not only makes one feel superior, but also gives the illusion of control without accountability. When we stand above others, our words carry more weight, our actions are more easily justified. And slowly, the real self behind the mask of morality begins to fade. We often imagine evil as something obvious: a criminal, a dictator, a cold-blooded killer. But in reality, evil often creeps in quietly, beginning with the smallest of acts: a condescending remark, a disdainful glance, a harsh gesture in the name of discipline. When these actions go unchallenged, they repeat, bolder, louder, until one day we don't even realize when we cross the line between right and wrong. Let's look at everyday scenarios. A team leader bullying a weaker employee, calling it pressure to meet deadlines. A teacher scolding a student in front of the class, justifying it as for your own good. A parent using harsh words or physical punishment, convinced that this is love. These behaviors, perhaps accidental at first, become habit when left unchecked, and ultimately evolve into cruelty disguised as responsibility or duty. We live in a society where status comes with power, and power is often misunderstood as a license to impose. In the workplace, the higher your position, the less you're questioned. At home, parents are assumed to be always right. In schools, teachers hold the authority to decide who deserves punishment. Before long, power ceases to be a tool for guidance. It becomes a weapon of control. And then, people start wearing a mask. The mask of morality. And we say, I'm doing this for their own good, or I don't want to, but I have to, or this is just part of my role. We are allowing ourselves to step one more inch into the dark. We no longer see the person in front of us as a fellow human being, but as a subordinate. Someone to manage, someone who needs to be corrected. At that point, we no longer feel guilt for causing harm, because we believe it's necessary. This mask of morality might be the most dangerous thing we've ever created. It hides cruelty under ideals. It makes horrific actions seem acceptable. It convinces us that even when we do something cruel, we're still a good person. Worse, this mask is often supported or ignored by society. People see nothing wrong when the powerful impose on the weak. They believe the stronger someone is, the more right they have to decide what's right or wrong. That's why, in so many of the world's tragedies, from war and oppression to domestic abuse, the perpetrators are not always monsters. Often, they are just ordinary people. Fathers, mothers, managers, teachers. People who've worn the mask of morality for so long, they've forgotten who they used to be. And it is right there that the Lucifer effect begins to take hold. We often believe that only evil people do bad things, but history has repeatedly shown us that even ordinary, kind and gentle individuals can commit horrifying acts if placed in the right circumstances. One of the most shocking examples is the My Lai massacre in 1968 during the Vietnam War. American soldiers, mostly just 18 to 20 years old, were sent to a small village. They weren't professional killers. Before that, they were just young men. Some carried photos of their girlfriends. Some had been college students. But when their commanders gave them permission to act as they saw fit, when the control was loosened and hatred was stirred, they opened fire on hundreds of innocent civilians, most of whom were women, children, and the elderly. One veteran later recalled with pain, "We no longer saw people, we saw targets. We no longer heard crying, we heard objectives to be eliminated. Children under 10 were shot while in their mothers' arms. Elderly people shaking on their porches were not spared." When humanity is stripped away from people, evil no longer looks like a demon. It looks like a soldier, drenched in sweat, trembling while holding a gun. The world was stunned. How could such normal young men commit such horror? The answer lies in the Lucifer effect. When someone is given power, permission to act, and is told, "This is your duty," they often discard personal moral responsibility. They no longer see themselves as decision makers, but as parts of a machine. And when morality is replaced by orders, cruelty becomes disturbingly easy to carry out. And it's not just in wartime. In everyday life, there are many other examples, though less extreme, that show how ordinary people can do terrible things simply because they believe, "I'm doing the right thing." The angel in white turned nightmare in a hospital. A young nurse in the UK named Lucy Letby was described by her colleagues as kind, gentle, always smiling while caring for newborns. But over 2 years, she secretly killed at least 7 babies and harmed many others. Lucy didn't kill in cold blood. She did it quietly, injecting insulin, pumping air into veins, overfeeding. When caught, she denied everything, insisting she did nothing wrong. Even more chilling, in her diary she wrote, "I don't know why I did it. I just felt like I held life and death in my hands, and that made me feel powerful. I'm not a bad person. I'm still a good nurse. An ordinary person, Someone who was trusted. But in a system with loose supervision and absolute authority in one person's hands, evil took root in the heart of someone who seemed incapable of wrongdoing. Violence from a guardian of order. At a shopping mall in Eastern Europe, a 35-year-old security guard was assigned to monitor suspicious behavior. When he saw a 14-year-old boy loitering near the changing rooms, he took the boy to a private room for questioning. There was no proof, no camera evidence of theft. But he didn't need a reason. His title as security gave him absolute power in that room. He scolded the boy, forced him to kneel, and slammed his hand on the table to intimidate. When the boy's mother arrived, he said coldly, "I followed protocol. If I don't scare him now, he might actually steal next time." This man had once been a soldier, had saved lives during floods. But in a position of authority, he allowed himself to vent anger and control a child, under the excuse of just doing my job. Silence kills compassion. At a high school in Canada, a quiet and small-framed student named Thomas was often bullied by older students. At first, it was just teasing. Then came cruel notes stuck to his desk. Then pouring water in his backpack. Eventually, he was forced to eat dirty food. No one spoke up. Teachers brushed it off as harmless school pranks. Parents said, "Boys should toughen up." The group continued day after day with the excuse, "It's just a joke, nothing serious." When Thomas suddenly stopped going to school, no one noticed. Only later was he found in his room, along with a note. "I don't know why people hate me. I just wish someone had spoken up for me." This is the painful truth. Evil doesn't just come from those who cause harm, but also from those who stand by and do nothing. The most terrifying part of the Lucifer effect is not that it creates new villains, but that it turns good people into ones who hurt others while still believing they've done nothing wrong. You might think, "I would never do that." But so did the people in these stories. They didn't wake up one day and say, "Today I'll do something cruel." Number. They changed gradually, silently, from the smallest things. We like to think of evil as something distant, locked in prisons, found on battlefields, or lurking in the minds of madmen. But true evil is not terrifying because it's loud. It's terrifying because it's ordinary. It doesn't scream. It whispers in silence when someone is being hurt. It's the averted gaze when injustice happens right before our eyes. Evil doesn't need horns or fangs. It only needs an ordinary person to stop thinking, stop questioning. It doesn't require grand actions. Sometimes it's just a nod to an absurd order, a smirk when someone is isolated or turning away, just to avoid trouble. And that's why evil spreads so easily. It moves like a gentle breeze through the cracks of morality, where personal responsibility is replaced by groupthink, conscience is muffled by rules, and kindness is traded for a false sense of safety. So what is the antidote? Not morality, because morality, if untrained, can be twisted. Not laws, because laws without just enforcement can be abused. Only awareness, a deliberate conscious attention to oneself, can keep us from slipping into darkness. Awareness is the ability to pause before acting and ask, what am I doing? For whom? Is this right? It is seeing injustice and not looking away. It is when watching a crowd mock someone, asking yourself, what if I were them? In Japan, there was once a 10th grade student who was bullied so badly he was afraid to go to school. He had considered ending his life multiple times, but what kept him holding on was a single piece of paper left secretly in his desk by a classmate. Not even a close friend. I saw how they treated you. I couldn't stop them, but I want you to know, you are not invisible. Just a small act, but it saved a life. Awareness doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes it's simply being sensitive, being thoughtful, choosing what's right in the smallest of moments. The Lucifer effect doesn't come like a storm. It creeps in drop by drop, like water wearing down stone. It begins with silence, with compromise, with just following orders. But if we stay aware, if each of us looks inward and keeps one question in our hearts, does this hurt someone? Then evil has no space to grow. You might think, I would never become like that. But remember, no one becomes a monster overnight. They change gradually, with approval, with silence, with numbness. And that's exactly why we must remain aware every single day in the smallest actions. Be the ones who dares to ask, dares to feel, dares to stop when the world is heading the wrong way. Because sometimes just one person who is aware is enough to keep the darkness from spreading.